originally in Spanish. Swaruu of Erra.
Wormholes. It's what's inside a black hole that will take you to the exit then, which is the sun, right?
Yes, it is generally a sun, but not just one. The internal transit system of a wormhole is complex and erratic. It also has exits through portals on distant planets, not just suns. As with everything, it's just a matter of matching frequencies. I know this is boring by now, but that's how it is. This universe works with frequencies and vibrations of harmonics. In the end, it all boils down to that.
Can you go inside a star? And if you go inside a star through the star, not through the black hole, you would come out in another star, right?
Entering through a star is not as simple as entering and that's it. But you have to wait or understand how it works, its rhythms, its cycles, to be able to see its entrance and to be able to more or less predict where its portal will go. You enter through what is known as sunspots. And with the frequency of the ship itself, you can modify the total frequency inside the wormhole so that you can alter the exit point by matching the frequency of the wormhole with that of the ship, so that it results in the exit frequency corresponding to where you wish to go. Stars, entries and exits by sunspots. Black holes, entries only. Portal planets, entries and exits.
Once a ship enters a black hole, can it communicate with other ships?
It cannot communicate with other ships. The statics and frequencies and energies inside are such that it is impossible to communicate with other ships or with the base, because what is used is neutrino in the lepton-muon band. This is manipulation of gravitational waves encoded within the ether. They do not escape the black hole. Reason why these transit systems are not used anymore, at least not by Taygeta.
Is that correct? Most physicists agree that Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity predicted black holes because they link space-time with gravity. That has direct implications for the death of stars, according to live science.
No. Black holes are gravitational concentration points, points of enormous attention within the ether, because in themselves they are like the compact form of another whole point in the universe, as seen from that of the observer. I don't like to use these words, but for reasons of making everything clear. It is like having an entire universe at a specific point of the observer's perception, within his universe in which he lives. There is no space-time as such to link with gravity. In fact, I can argue that gravity is everything. Since gravity is nothing but a tension of a consciousness or consciousness itself. Gravity is ether in motion. Ether is consciousness. Gravity in motion is ether having consciousness of its own existence. These are ideas. The flow of gravity in a sea of potential energy are ideas within the great mind of Source, unified consciousness. Stars, from one point of view or another, yes, they are born, live and die, for they are beings with consciousness. From their reference, they have linear time, and they share agreements of perception with other lesser beings like us. That is why they can be perceived as born, live and die. Einstein is only correct within the framework of his own self-contained mathematics in a numerical universe. The universe, the whole, the source, is very simple. It is the human mind that complicates things. And in the process of trying to understand and explain everything, it seeks answers by parts. And because people are creators, they find those parts, because they manifest them themselves. Law of the mirrors of this universe. You cannot look for something without finding it. But in the end, nothing is more than an idea. Simple, beautiful, and peaceful. God particle, they find all that because they created more with particles. They manifest very quickly, including manifesting their why. There are mathematics that fit their expectations. But they are the ones that create everything. Scientists who believe in a deterministic, only observable universe. They search, so they find. Einstein's spacetime, 3 of volume, 1 of time. It confers entirely 3D formulas with an unalterable fixed time linearity, rather than in theory by approaching large mass or velocity, ignoring all other factors, such as the very fact that apparently empty space also has mass, so that at large distances alone, it alters its 3D linear time equations, which from that perspective alone renders the calculations inaccurate, not reflecting the objective reality. It is said that the universe is expanding because human observatories see the light coming from distant galaxies in a range of photon frequencies towards the red spectrum, infrared. So they suppose that this is due to a Doppler effect, proving, as they think, that they are moving away. Because at high speed, or observing an object moving away at high speed, such as galaxy, the wavelength of light lengthens, explaining, according to them, that the universe is expanding, because galaxies are moving away from each other. Yes, they are moving. Some are moving away from each other, some are moving closer together. But what you are seeing is not Doppler effect with the light from those galaxies. Rather, as the light travels great distances, it travels as neutrinos near or between the ether, and the material is being filtered by the mass of gravity, of potential energy of ether flow in the apparently empty space. And so, as through a lens, as the atmosphere filters the light of the moon at certain times, leaving only the spectrum of red, thus creating the phenomenon of the blood moon. It's the same here. The light is filtered by distances because it is not vacuum, it is ether. They do not take this into consideration in their equations. Their formulas are wrong.
This would then answer this question, wouldn't it? Was Einstein's entire general theory of relativity a fraud?
Yes. Why? As with Darwin, among others, Einstein's theory of relativity was imposed as the basis of all physics, until the advent of quantum, to limit the advances of other researchers who were coming perilously close to discovering that the universe is entirely potential energy being guided by gravity, consciousness. Bohr, Heisenberg, Tesla being the most important. All their work fell by the wayside, and Einstein became the law, even promoting that he was a genius with a high IQ of 185. It makes a fool of anyone who dares to question him, trying to compare himself with the great genius of Einstein, who was a Jew, Freemason, Jesuit, Illuminati, from the club. Someone asks me, is human quantum mechanics a copy of Einstein's relativity? No, it is something else entirely. Quantum mechanics itself is an attempt to put everything that is consciousness into a shoebox of socially accepted mathematics. In itself, the two camps are in conflict with each other, relativity and quantum mechanics. And there is the problem of the famous unified field, which is basically an attempt to make the formulas of relativity compatible with those of quantum mechanics. And so far, it has not been possible, because both are erroneous and exist only within their own reduced mathematical world, incompatible with each other. For me, the problem of the unified field is one of the greatest proofs of the falsity of human science. Many have said that they have succeeded, only in part, if anything. But if they compare with other major problems, again, their mathematics falls down. That is to say, that they succeeded only because they succeeded in making a side or color of a Rubik's cube. Anyone can solve a color, but not the whole cube, because you can't solve it color by color, side by side. Rather, all at once, the whole cube, all the colors, at the same time. The same here. Relativity and quantum mechanics are intrinsically incompatible with each other, and both are human creations. Doppler. With velocity, from in front of the moving object, the sound or light waves are grouped in short frequencies, behind the object in long frequencies, like infrared. Okay, another question I have from someone. Is the existence of an electron real as it represents quantum mechanics? Again, this is different from one point of view or another. Strictly speaking, there is no electron. It is only potential energy that is more concentrated in a specific range or orbit of the nucleus of an atom, only by being observed by someone. By a consciousness, it acquires a particle quality, ergo electron, negative charge. This is known as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Short answer: does an electron exist or not? It depends if they are looking at it or not. Now, we know that the universe is not expanding. Why would you say it doesn't? Apart from the fact that time does not exist and that everything is infinite. Any other argument? Because all motion confers a beginning and an end, even if it is only from the point at which it began to be observed and the point at which it ended to be observed. That is to say, everything already is, and the universe is only observed from a unique and limited position of a temporal line created by the observing person. That is to say that from the point of view of a linear life, it could be perceived as having expanded. But when jumping to another line, it will be perceived in another position, more or less expanded. It only expands from the limited point of view of an observing consciousness and does not confer an attribute of total expansion of the entire universe, as it is composed of elements, forces, densities, which are not being taken into account or observed. The expansion of the universe is relative to the observer. Yet, from Taygetan science, there is no evidence of total expansion of the universe, only of motion. And the very act of trying to observe motion at those distances is self-defeating, because light behaves differently just by observing it and by crossing large distances because of the effect already described.
What would happen if the Earth's magnetic fields were reversed?
Total chaos, both with electronics, obvious, and with migratory animals. There would be a large number of animals that would die, species in extinction. Human society would not be able to function either. Power grids would collapse. There would be changes in the ocean currents and consequently in the climate. For many years, there would be storms in strange places. The Earth would never be the same again. We do not see this as imminent.
But it could happen if the matrix is diluted quickly, right?
The most likely scenario is that the matrix was diluted without the change of polarity. I know they say that the cycle is over, that it is imminent, that it is inescapable, but we have no sign that this is true. Yes, polarity shifts happen, but it is not imminent. It is more fear. There are other more important things to worry about than that. For us, it falls into the same category as Nibiru, which I am tired of saying is Tiamat, and it's not out there stalking the Earth.
Can we have the high Schumann resonance like 5D and still have the Van Allen bands? Or are they intrinsically incompatible with 5D?
Van Allen bands, it is possible to have them in agreement with 5D, but as soon as the frequencies match those of 5D, they are no longer relevant. So it makes no difference whether they are there or not. In other words, the Van Allen bands as they are known are incompatible with 5D.
Okay, someone asks me, why do a feather and a hammer fall into the void at the same time?
Because there is no friction on the part of the feather to stop or slow the fall. This in a vacuum. The weight, mass of an object is not related to the speed at which it is pushed by the gravitational current. This is basic Newtonian science. Within a medium such as an atmosphere, yes, a feather falls slower. In a vacuum, it does not. The velocities are equivalent. It is about gravity, the principle of equivalence. Just that none of that applies, as it is more empty, self-supporting mathematics amalgamated with relativity, Hawking's, and Newton. Basically, you have to throw all that out the window. Sure, it sounds logical what they say, but it applies only to 3D and gravity as one force in the universe among many. It's another point where something has or can have more than one explanation depending on the parameters, although some will always be limited. Gravity is not bound to mass, as they say. It is mass that is linked to the amount of gravity a point in the universe receives. Basically, what they say is that the more mass an object has, the greater its gravity will be. They have it backwards. An object has a lot of mass because it is a strong concentration of gravity or gravitational waves.
Question: does gravity have anything to do with the intention, manifestation of a consciousness?
Yes, it is directly related. Or rather, that's exactly what gravity is.
Okay, climate change is our fault as humans.
It's the cabal's fault. Yes, there is climate change, but it is not how you are told. For starters, global warming is a complete scam. CO2 has nothing to do with it, and it is an essential gas for life, especially that of plants, which ultimately manufacture everything. Climate change is directly due to artificial climate engineering programs and chemtrails. To the next degree, it is due to deforestation and the destruction of ecosystems caused by the enormous extensions of land used for agriculture. In the next degree, it is due to industries and their waste. And lastly, to the human population with their vehicles. The cabal makes you believe that you are the polluters. But cars and even diesel trucks have little or nothing to do with climate change because their effects are very local, in a city, for example.
Why is the night sky dark?
The night sky is dark because of the absence of light. I do not understand the question.
The paradoxical statement says more or less that in a static and infinite universe, the night sky should be totally bright with no dark or unlit regions.
Light gets tired. It loses power with distance because there is refraction in space, because it's not really a vacuum. It is a fluid. It is water at very high vibrational frequency. From the 3D, space is a vacuum, a valid perception, but not from the most expanded point of view. The concept that space is water is not new. It is found in the Bible. But the concept that it is water at very high vibratory frequency is new. Does this water look and feel different? That water changes as everything changes as you raise the frequency. It is still water, but you do not see it or perceive it if you are not at a matching frequency. If you are a fish under the sea, everything that is water is just a normal medium because you are there. You are still affected by what is not in your existential frequency because everything is connected and is part of a whole fractal frequency fabric of everything there is. Gravity is nothing more than waves in that medium of water at high frequency. All energy propagates through water because everything is ultimately water.
What is this theory of the evolution of parallel universes?
What I see or have observed with or from ship, everything is intertwined in frequencies, like a great cosmic fabric. There are no parallel universes in themselves, not as separate entities, but as subtle variants and not so subtle variants of everything, and which in turn make up the whole. Is it true that galaxies collide? Yes, they collide. They come together. But from the point of view of isolated people, it takes so long that it is not within their reality, only as a concept. This is something between galaxies, from their very energetic interaction with each other.
Do you know why the Earth's rotation is accelerating? Does it have something to do with the Van Allen bands?
Natural rhythms that have to do with the gravitational dynamics between celestial bodies that influence each other. That is, the position of the other planets and their gravitational conjunction. For example, Saturn and Jupiter together causes a tiny but measurable acceleration of the rotation of the Earth and the other stars. In the same way, when there's another gravitational dynamic, later on it will accelerate again. And it has always been like that. These are normal movements of every planet. They do not have precision or absolutely perfect continuity always. It is also necessary to see the influence of perception of the particular and collective observers, who are the ones who ultimately generate that time in the first place, knowing that the other stars and their inhabitants also influence a greater collective temporal perception of the solar system, for example, and even greater outside of it. It all comes together.
Someone asks me, how do they measure frequency? What unit of measurements do they use? A frequency is measured using time, and time is not linear.
A measure of frequency is used, which is the time of hydrogen oscillation at absolute zero in interstellar space. It is true that there is no way to measure time as a constant unit in a formula. It is a variable, not a constant. Yes, that is what the interstellar races use as a base measurement that have among themselves a certain homologation of units for cooperation and to be able to have a reference when they communicate. One unit is equivalent to one vibration cycle of the hydrogen molecule, which is the simplest molecule there is, one nucleus, one electron in interstellar space temperature, which is close to minus 273.15 degrees Celsius. That is the last measurable point where oscillation is still preserved in the hydrogen molecule before total freezing, since absolute zero as a temperature represents the point where all molecular activity has stopped.
About the planetary poles. Do they affect the energy? Do they reverse it? What happens with this incoming energy that arrives?
It is very difficult for the poles to reverse, especially now. That is more artificial fear. It will not happen. The last time was because millions of tons of water from Tiamat reached the Earth. This way, yes, because it disrupts the whole energetic dynamics of the planet. As for incoming energies from other systems, it would have to be investigated with computer simulations. But I dare say it is basically the same once the Earth's polarity has been reversed. But that is only magnetic. The magnetic poles change all the time. They migrate up to 15 kilometers approx. It varies every year. That is normal. They just say that to alarm the population. But it has always been like that.
Yes, they change. But how often are they reversed, or they usually do not reverse? It is one thing to change kilometers, but can they be reversed?
It is unusual for them to reverse. It takes a lot of energy for that, a reason. Contrary to what the terrestrial scientists say, whom I never see connecting the Tiamat flood with the pole reversal. That is basic and obvious that in those circumstances, yes, that happens.
And all these pole changes, or magnetic axes, I don't know if it's the same thing. What repercussions do they have on biology?
It's the same thing. Catastrophic for biology. Mass extinctions, destruction of everything.
Thank you. So there was no glaciation and therefore no melting of the poles, causing the Great Flood, right?
That's right. No. Even with glaciation and melting, it would not cover that volume of water. It is a good theory. I accept it. The problem is that even the official researchers, many, if not all, the most recent and with cutting-edge research, know that the glaciation of 15,000 years ago, which would officially say, in reality, never happened. Yes, there were glaciations, but much further back, about 230,000 years ago. But considering that time is difficult to measure in a linear way if it goes beyond 12,500 years ago.
Originally in English. Did Tiamat explosion cause the Ice Age on Earth? Ice ages occur due to normal planetary cycles, and the last one was like 25,000 years ago on Earth, and not 15,000 as experts say. But it did cause a pole shift. And that was horrible, because the magnetics get disrupted, so does gravity, causing mountains to shift and continents to move with massive volcanic activity, and rocks the size of mountains flying through the air. This caused the modification of the shape of the continents to how we know them today. And this was recently, only 12,500 to 12,000 years ago, not millions of years ago, as experts on Earth say. And it was not gradual, it was dramatic and sudden, causing extinction to planetary levels. Earth experts are aware of this, and there is proof of what I say, but they hide it. Although not too well, it is findable. Earth strata, fossil records and artifacts don't match the official time schedule, indicating it all happened dramatically recently. This didn't only affect Earth, as would be logical. Mars' surface changed from being a forest-filled life planet to a desert climate mess. And Venus received even more water than Earth, sinking its vast, beautiful continents beneath the waters, making it become a water planet, having only sparse island regions that once were high mountains. Mercury, on the other hand, also suffered deformation caused by the energy shift in the entire solar system, having been thrown a lot closer to the Sun, causing total devastation to its surface, and with it, annihilation and total extinction of all its life, becoming a lifeless rock roasting in solar radiation. The outer solar system also suffered a lot, as the planets, all of them, moved all further away from the Sun, causing also mass extinction. Saturn was a lot closer to Earth back then, easily and visible. So was Jupiter. Never before had a war destroyed an entire solar system as the Tiamat War did. And on Earth, almost all have forgotten all this. But even in the face of total annihilation and destruction, people managed to survive. Some at least. But the trauma was great, and it got embedded into the collective memory to a grave subconscious level, causing a very strong post-traumatic stress syndrome in all as a collective, in the species that later was to become the humans. This is also explained by a few truly awesome and wise scholars as the main cause of the fragmentation of the persona. The birth of the ego as consciousness was fractured in two, a subconscious and a conscious. Death of the self and of the I, birth of the human ego. Quoting Sigmund Freud, Carl Gustav Jung, Ayn Rand, Jordan Maxwell, and Michael Tsarion here. I have the question about DNA splicing and all that. Matthias asked me this long ago. DNA enhancement. Is that done on Earth? Yes, they are, especially in recent years, and by the military, and also by companies and institutions in Silicon Valley, among others. Serious genetic research they keep from humans, and they are way ahead of what they tell them. For example, cloning technology is widespread. Also, the advent of super soldiers, or genetically altered individuals with genetic characteristics to enhance their combat skills. Also, the technology of gene alteration and genetically altered organisms, GMO, inserted into papaya technology. The public does not see the threat as they do not understand how advanced genetic alteration technology really is. This is a question that Dr. Alex sent me. The question is, can DNA be transmitted through water by frequencies? A group of scientists sent the coded information to water and then added the necessary amino acids, enzymes, and substances. A few hours later, there were copies of the DNA in the water. They repeated the experiment 12 times, always with the same result. It seems crazy to me. Is it possible? Yes, and that is how all the genetics that exist are produced. Water is a medium, and the harmonic of the frequency is what determines where the matter will form. The particles, in this case, the amino acid chains of RNA and DNA. But it would require enormous control over the frequency harmonics needed to reproduce a DNA-RNA specimen. But the medium, water, yes, it is conducive to that. Yes, it says that there were certain conditions that had to be met, such as low radio frequency waves and other things. In itself, the ether is the one that passes all the information as a medium of potential energy, from a harmonic of coherent frequency that emanates from an intention of a consciousness, the simple fact of being and thinking. And ether is nothing more than water in a state of a very high vibratory frequency, in a state of high density, and it is scalar. That is to say that the same sample of ether is present with its parts and its corresponding information as it corresponds to the frequency density from which it is observed. And normal water itself is only ether at low density. Observing water as just hydrogen and oxygen, H2O, is a simplistic example of how humans and their science break down something of incredible importance into seemingly worthless simple things. Water is the closest thing to a universal diluent. That is to say, the medium with which everything is dissolved and transmuted. I am talking about water in general. But if we look at it from or with its scalar aspects, then it is the universal diluent of everything in its ether form. So, as an answer to Dr. Alex, yes, it can, and indeed that is how everything is created, including DNA, RNA. But it depends on the degree of control over the frequency harmonics of the emitter. And that is where I am a bit skeptical, but open to more data.